Where'd you get a cup?
Thanks for downstairs. I realize we've been at this for some time already, but at the risk of derailing the dialogue you initiated, and may I just say how thrilled I am that you did, Karkat, I would just like to qualify my entire analysis of your Alternian culture by saying that in contrast with life on Bethoris, while your people may have been engaged in violent, lethal class struggle for millions of sweeps, by no means does this imply that the Bethoran way of life was entirely without problematic elements, perhaps even more disturbing and insidious for their lack of acknowledgement and open discussion, particularly as a consequence of what, in my view, were widely and dismayingly unexamined systemic social injustices resulting from the entrenched power dynamics in play, dynamics strikingly similar to those of your planet's markedly more bellicose iteration, which is only serving to fully vindicate my hypothesis that such a hierarchy is really predicated on intrinsic dysfunction and failure to shift all the usual narratives and undiagnosed problems into an open, judgment-free discourse through which problematic oppression, culling culture and violence against scrubs, loose abuse, complementary and analogous hate speech, hail filling, slurries and other concupiscent fluids, lifespan shaming, ableist slurs, prolixation. Actually, maybe it would be easier for you to list your triggers, and I'll do my best to avoid those topics, or navigate them with as delicately as possible. Great. It sounds like you don't have any triggers, at least none that you know about. I'll proceed with caution, nevertheless. Just please let me know if you start feeling triggered by anything I'm saying, and we can take a brief time out while you summon your morale to help you pacify you. Assuming you have one. Not that I'm presuming you do, but I heard that you did, is that correct? If not, I apologize. I further apologize if your orientation precludes the possibility as a pale, aromantic, pan-quadrant demi-romantic, something in the gray-pale sexual department or such. And hopefully you're not triggered by such presumptuous Castilian-normative language. It wouldn't be the first time I was guilty of such an inexcusable microaggression, and I'm not so oblivious to my own romantic privilege to believe it would be the last time either. I'm glad I brought up the subject of unexamined privilege because it dovetails beautifully with the point I was about to make regarding Bethoran society and its savage umbral potentiality, which later manifested through the kind of Alternian brutality you are all too familiar with. Those in the higher echelons of the hemospectrum, such as the ceruleans, or blue bloods, careful, being loose with such terminologies, opening the floodgates to a whole host of toxic sinus language and hemophobic slurs. When addressing the challenges faced by those lower on the spectrum, such as the mid-hues or in particular warm castes like umbers, ochres, or rust bloods, another slur, highly problematic, deeply offensive and triggering terminology, strongly imploring you steer clear of this term, they would be well advised to check their cerulean privilege, particularly before dismissing hardships or marginalizing planes of oppression, which can be difficult for them to identify or empathize with from their advantageous position within the Bethoran Alternian power structures. And some may argue that in our peaceful utopian culture, that we have freed ourselves from injustice and disparities in privilege in a post-scarcity economy, largely equal rights distributed across the hemospectrum, and therefore exist in a post-spectral world, laugh out loud, and therefore there is no need to champion important social causes, and there is nothing left to debate, but really nothing could be further from the truth. You just need to educate yourself and carefully investigate the long-standing power dynamics in play. For instance, a seemingly harmless remark from a cis-blooded cerulean toward an umber or, God forbid, a Burgundy, or yes, even a warm-identifying, physically cooler caste about their very long-term future plans, such as on the order of centuries, then this may prove to be a very hurtful microaggression due to the fact that low hues cannot possibly live that long themselves, and the more privileged caste could easily outlive dozens of generations of mid-hues or hundreds of generations of BUOYs, Burgundy, umber, ochre bloods. Note, please avoid describing the lattermost as lime bloods, as it has historically been used as an especially vicious epithet. Such remarks can further trigger painful reminders of how cooler castes, to some extent OJAs, but CIPs and Royal Vs in particular, have been able to use their tremendous lifespans over the millennia to gain a stranglehold over the social order, have been able to completely dictate our societal evolution by ensuring only their cultural agendas and narratives receive the dialogue's air supply, assuring the codification of those resultant ideals and deciding what normalcy entails. And sadly, these absolutes become internalized across the full spectral range, even within those of most compromised privilege. And so you begin to see the cyclical nature of this assumption and the resulting inertia against positive change and raising awareness of the most underproblematized issues, which I think we can agree is pretty problematic. And really, it's everyone's business to examine their privilege, even Burgundies, who may be subject to the pitfall of believing incorrectly there are none on the scale beneath them whom they enjoy certain privileges over, which off-spectrum trolls will never know, such as those identifying as other bloods or caste multiples, fully blooded, and who hemologically ID as having a caste which manifests nowhere, as yet known, in anyone physically, or for that matter, off-specs who physically do possess such a blood type, or mutants, very problematic term, highly triggering to some, be warned, such as you and I, Karkat. But this puts us both in a situation which, to our knowledge, uniquely allows us to understand and empathize with tragically underprivileged and unempowered groups across all scales of life, thus affording us both what I'd like to call a uniquely underprivileged privilege, which, yes, is a kind of privilege we should both strive to check as well whenever we can. This same uniquely underprivileged perspective, as I'm sure you know, was a disadvantage upon my post-scratch iteration as well, and while I have no doubt you justifiably came to revere that figure of your planet's rich history and your personal lineage, and while his goals of peace, equality, and a truly spectral-blind society, I'm afraid I personally have trouble condoning his methods. I don't like to use the term problematic lightly, but, well, his tactics were nothing if not massively problematic, to say the least, employing violent uprising to effect change, and emblazoning his mark upon history and his faithful followers with the salty flourish of a single rude, shouted swear word. It's not to my taste, even though he is who I would have grown up to be in another life. But no, I prefer to effect social change through rational, honest discourse and contributing to ongoing dialogues, focusing on what should be the real goals, through keen adherence to the discipline of problematics, ensuring that we stay focused on successfully problematizing a wide range of direly undercomplicated social dilemmas. It's nice to see we agree on so much. Maybe we are not so unalike, despite our drastically different upbringings. Anyway, as I was saying, the story of your ancestor, and more importantly, my exhaustive list of misgivings with his approach to social change, is quite a long and elaborate one, but it actually fits brilliantly within the larger mosaic, which captures the broad strokes of my post. I mean, our discussion. Trigger warnings for the following content include ancestor bashing, faith shaming, loud swearing, torture, burn wounds, ship sinking. Again, seriously, just let me know if you begin to feel triggered by anything, even slightly. We'll pause and see if we can really explore those issues and identify exactly how I may have invalidated your struggles. Without further ado, the story is as follows.